I'm Wilma, 29 years old, and I've spent my entire life living in my older sister Denise's shadow. Growing up in Boston, I was always the afterthought, the forgotten one. But everything changed last spring at Hartman's Fine Jewelry, when Denise's palm connected with my cheek in front of a store full of people. What I never expected was how a complete stranger would step in and turn my humiliation into the moment that would transform my entire life. Before I tell you how my sister's slap changed my life forever, let me know where you're watching from, and hit that subscribe button if you've ever felt invisible in your own family. Growing up as the younger sister to Denise was like living as a shadow to the Sunday. While she was 32 now, those 3 years between us felt like decades when we were kids. From the very beginning, Denise was the golden child in our family, outgoing, ambitious, and blessed with the kind of conventional beauty that turned heads. I, on the other hand, was quiet and thoughtful, more interested in colors and shapes than competing for attention. Our childhood home in a working-class neighborhood of Boston wasn't filled with many luxuries, but whatever extras our parents could afford always went to Denise first. My father worked double shifts at the local factory, while my mother cleaned houses, and they both shared the same dream, that their children would have better lives than they did. Somehow, that dream became exclusively pinned on Denise. "Look at your sister's report card," my mother would say, waving Denise's straight A's in front of me. "Why can't you be more like her?" Meanwhile, my own report cards, which featured A's in art and English, but B's and C's in math and science, were met with disappointment and lectures about applying myself. When Denise needed a new dress for a school dance, our parents would scrape together the money, no matter how tight things were that month. When I needed art supplies for a school project, I was told to make do with what we had around the house. "Art won't put food on the table," my father would say with a dismissive wave of his hand. The pattern continued as we got older. When I was 12, I spent weeks creating a detailed pencil drawing of our family home as an anniversary gift for our parents. The day before the anniversary, I left it on my desk to add the final touches. The next morning, I found Denise presenting my artwork as her own. The look of pride on my parents' faces as they praised her talent was like a knife to my heart. "But that's mine," I said, my voice small and uncertain. Denise rolled her eyes. "Prove it," she challenged, knowing full well I couldn't. My mother shot me a disapproving look. "Don't be jealous of your sister, Wilma. It's not becoming." That was just one incident of many. In high school, Denise took credit for a poem I wrote that won a district-wide competition. In college, she borrowed my research notes for a paper and never returned them, claiming they'd been lost when she actually used them to ace her own assignment. While I pursued a degree in art history despite my parents' disapproval, Denise went to law school and became exactly what they'd always wanted: a high-powered corporate attorney with a corner office and a salary that allowed her to buy them the kinds of gifts they'd never been able to afford for themselves. Every family gathering became a showcase for Denise's latest achievements, while my work at a small local gallery was barely acknowledged. "When are you going to get a real job?" my mother would ask me over holiday dinners, while my father nodded in agreement. "This is a real job," I'd reply, but they'd already turned their attention back to Denise, who was showing off her latest designer handbag or telling stories about her important clients. Denise's materialistic nature only grew as she climbed the corporate ladder. Each promotion came with new status symbols: a luxury car, expensive jewelry, designer clothes. She measured her worth by the brands she could afford, and she made sure everyone knew exactly what those brands cost. When she married Patrick, a wealth manager with family money and connections, their wedding was a lavish affair designed to impress. I served as a bridesmaid, wearing a dress Denise had selected that was both unflattering and uncomfortable. During her toast, she thanked everyone who had supported her throughout her life, mentioning friends she hadn't seen in years, but somehow forgetting to acknowledge her only sister. I watched as Patrick smiled stiffly beside her, his hand possessively on her waist. He was handsome in a conventional way, with perfectly coiffed hair and a tailored suit, but there was something cold in his eyes. Throughout their courtship, I'd noticed how he subtly controlled her, approving or disapproving of her clothing choices, interrupting her when she spoke, checking her phone when she wasn't looking. But Denise either didn't notice or didn't care. too enamored with the lifestyle he provided. Despite everything, I kept trying to build a relationship with my sister. I'd call to check in, send thoughtful gifts on her birthday, invite her to gallery openings. Most of my attempts were met with last-minute cancellations or lukewarm responses. Maybe next time, she'd say, before launching into stories about her latest vacation or purchase. After years of struggling to make ends meet while pursuing my passion, I finally caught a break. Augusta Phillips, the owner of Phillips Contemporary, one of the most respected galleries in the city, had visited our small gallery and seen some of my curatorial work. She offered me a position as an assistant curator, with a modest but livable salary and the chance to work with serious artists and collectors. For the first time, I felt like my knowledge and eye for art were truly valued. Augusta appreciated my perspective and encouraged me to trust my instincts. The artists I worked with respected my opinions, and clients actually listened to my recommendations. I was still living in a tiny apartment with secondhand furniture, but I was doing work I loved and finally starting to believe in my own worth. My family, of course, was less impressed. "An assistant?" my mother said when I told her about the new job. "I thought you'd be running your own gallery by now." Denise didn't even bother to ask what I'd be doing. She just commented that the art world seemed like an expensive hobby for people with too much time and money. But for once, I didn't let their reactions diminish my pride. This job was my achievement, and I was determined to make the most of it, with or without my family's approval. 6 months into my new position at Phillips Contemporary, I landed an important client for the gallery. Richard Saunders was a retired surgeon with an impressive collection of contemporary sculpture, and after weeks of meetings and careful cultivation, he agreed to consign several valuable pieces to our upcoming exhibition. Augusta was thrilled, and to my surprise, she gave me a small bonus in recognition of my work. "You've earned this," she said, handing me an envelope. "You should do something nice for yourself." It wasn't a large sum, but it was more money than I'd ever had at one time that wasn't already earmarked for rent or bills. After putting most of it into my savings account, I decided to use a small portion to buy myself something special, a tangible reminder of this professional milestone. For weeks, I'd admired a silver pendant in the window of Hartman's Fine Jewelry, an upscale shop downtown. The piece was simple but elegant, a delicate silver teardrop with a small emerald that reminded me of my grandmother's eyes. She had been the only family member who had encouraged my artistic pursuits, telling me stories about her own unrealized dreams of becoming a painter. Before she passed away, she had given me her watercolor set, which I still kept on my desk as inspiration. The pendant was more expensive than anything I'd ever bought for myself, but not extravagantly so. I calculated that if I brought lunch from home for the next few weeks instead of buying it, I could justify the purchase. It would be my own private celebration, a physical symbol of my growing confidence. On a sunny Saturday morning, I put on my nicest casual outfit, dark jeans, a cream-colored blouse, and the single pair of good leather boots I owned, and made my way to Hartman's. As I approached the gleaming storefront with its tasteful displays and uniformed security guard, I felt a flutter of anxiety. Places like this weren't designed for people like me, with modest bank accounts and no designer labels. Taking a deep breath, I pushed open the heavy glass door and stepped inside. The interior was hushed and elegant, with soft lighting that made the jewelry displays sparkle. Classical music played quietly in the background, and the carpet was so plush I could feel it through the soles of my boots. A few other customers browsed the cases, all of them dressed far more expensively than I was. A couple examined diamond rings, the woman's hand already adorned with a massive engagement ring. An older gentleman in a bespoke suit conferred with a sales associate about watch options. I felt immediately out of place and considered turning around and leaving. Before I could retreat, a sales associate approached me with a warm smile. "Good morning," he said. "I'm Marcus. Welcome to Hartman's. Is there something specific I can help you with today?" I braced myself for the subtle once-over, the slight cooling of interest that usually followed when retail staff assessed my net worth based on my appearance. But, to my surprise, Marcus's friendly expression didn't change. "I was interested in looking at the silver pendant in the window display," I said, my voice coming out quieter than I intended. The one with the small emerald. Excellent eye, Marcus said, gesturing for me to follow him. That's a new piece from our spring collection. The designer is known for her minimalist approach that really showcases the quality of the stones. As we reached the appropriate display case, Marcus retrieved a set of keys from his pocket and carefully removed the pendant I had admired. He placed it on a velvet tray and set it before me with the same care and ceremony I imagined he used with customers buying diamond tiaras. The emerald is Colombian, he explained, allowing me to pick up the pendant and examine it. Small but flawless. The setting is sterling silver with a platinum finish for additional durability. The pendant was even more beautiful up close. The emerald caught the light, revealing depths of color that weren't visible from a distance. The chain was delicate but sturdy, and the craftsmanship was evident in every detail. It's perfect, I said, already calculating whether I could stretch my budget just a bit more to make it mine. Would you like to try it on? Marcus offered, holding out his hands to take the pendant. When I nodded, he came around to help me with the clasp. In the mirror he provided, I could see how the pendant nestled just below my collarbone, the silver bright against my skin, the emerald picking up the green flecks in my hazel eyes. It suits you beautifully, Marcus said, and I could tell he meant it. The proportions are perfect for your frame and the color is lovely with your complexion. For the next 20 minutes, Marcus treated me like any other valued customer. He showed me several other pieces within my price range when I mentioned my budget, never making me feel lesser for not looking at more expensive options. He answered my questions about care and craftsmanship, and shared stories about the designers whose work was represented in the store. When I finally decided to purchase the pendant I had originally admired, Marcus seemed genuinely pleased. An excellent choice, he said. Would you like to wear it out, or shall I box it for you? I'd like to wear it, I said, feeling a rush of pleasure as he carefully removed the price tag and adjusted the clasp one final time. Marcus escorted me to the register, where he processed my payment with the same respectful attention he'd shown throughout our interaction. He placed the pendant's box, certificate of authenticity, and a small cleaning cloth in a tasteful bag embossed with the store's logo. Thank you for visiting us today, he said, handing me the bag. I hope we'll see you again soon. For once, I didn't feel like an imposter or an afterthought. In this small moment, I was just another customer making a meaningful purchase, treated with dignity and respect, regardless of my bank balance or family connections. As I signed the receipt, I heard the door open behind me, accompanied by the click of high heels on the marble floor. Without turning, I knew exactly who had entered the store. I would recognize the sound of my sister's confident stride anywhere. I turned slowly, the bag containing my purchase clutched tightly in my hand. Denise stood just inside the entrance, her expression shifting from casual interest to shock as she recognized me. She wore a designer suit in a shade of blue that had undoubtedly been selected to complement her eyes, and diamonds glittered at her ears and wrist. Patrick stood a few steps behind her, absorbed in his phone and seemingly oblivious to the tension suddenly filling the room. Wilma? Denise said, her voice carrying across the store. What are you doing here? The question was innocent enough, but her tone conveyed her real meaning. You don't belong in a place like this. Just doing a bit of shopping, I replied, trying to keep my voice light and casual. How are you, Denise? Nice to see you, Patrick. Patrick looked up briefly from his phone, giving me a distracted nod before returning his attention to the screen. Denise, however, was already moving toward me, her eyes flicking to the bag in my hand and then to Marcus, who still stood behind the counter. Shopping at Hartman's? She said with a small laugh that made my skin prickle. I didn't realize assistant curators were so well compensated these days. Marcus maintained his professional demeanor, though I could tell from the slight stiffening of his posture that he had registered the implied insult. Miss Phillips gave me a small bonus for bringing in a new client, I explained, immediately regretting sharing even this much information. Why did I still feel the need to justify myself to Denise? How nice, Denise said, in a tone that suggested it was anything but. She turned to Marcus with a bright, artificial smile. My sister has always been so frugal. I'm surprised to see her splurging. Your sister made a beautiful selection, Marcus said smoothly. Would you like to see our new collection as well? We just received several pieces I think would interest you. I began to edge toward the door, hoping to make a quiet exit before things escalated further, but Denise reached out and caught my arm. "Don't rush off," she said. "Show me what you bought that was worth breaking your precious budget." Her fingers dug into my arm slightly harder than necessary, and I knew from experience that refusing would only make things worse. With reluctance, I reached into the bag and removed the small box. Denise took it from my hands without asking and opened it, her eyebrows rising slightly as she examined the pendant. "This is what you spent your bonus on? A tiny emerald in silver?" She held the box up to the light, examining the pendant with exaggerated scrutiny. "You could have put this toward a security deposit for a better apartment, or at least bought something that looks substantial." "I like it," I said simply, reaching to take the box back. "The emerald reminds me of Grandma." Denise rolled her eyes. "Always so sentimental. No wonder you're still struggling while the rest of us have moved on." Patrick had finally put his phone away and joined us, draping an arm possessively around Denise's shoulders. "We're looking at the diamond tennis bracelets," he informed me with the air of someone announcing a major accomplishment. "Anniversary gift." "That's nice," I said, attempting to retrieve my purchase from Denise's hands. "I should be going. I have plans this afternoon." "What plans could you possibly have?" Denise asked, holding the box just out of my reach. "Another afternoon sketching in the park? Or are you meeting your artist friends for coffee to discuss how the commercial world just doesn't understand your vision?" The casual cruelty of her words stung, as they always did. Around us, other customers were beginning to notice the tension, casting curious glances in our direction. Marcus intervened smoothly. "Perhaps I could show you both our new arrivals? We have some lovely pieces that have just come in." In a moment, Denise said dismissively, her attention still focused on me and the pendant she now dangled from her fingers. "I'm just trying to understand my sister's sudden interest in fine jewelry." "It's not sudden," I said, my patience wearing thin. "And it's not that fine, it's just something special I wanted for myself." "Playing dress-up, more like it," Denise said with a sharp laugh. "Pretending to be something you're not." "Miss Phillips values my work?" I said quietly but firmly. "I earned that bonus, and I chose to spend a small part of it on something meaningful to me. I don't need your approval." The store had grown quieter, the other customers and staff clearly aware of the uncomfortable scene unfolding. Patrick looked bored and vaguely embarrassed, checking his watch and scanning the store, as though hoping to be rescued by a sales associate with the bracelet they had come to purchase. "Values your work?" Denise repeated, her voice rising slightly. "Please, she hired you because you're cheap and desperate. Don't kid yourself into thinking you're anything special in that world. I know people who collect art, Wilma. Real collectors. They laugh about galleries like yours, with your pretentious little exhibitions that no one important attends." "That's enough, Denise," I said, a rare flash of anger giving me courage. "You don't know anything about my work or the gallery. You've never even bothered to come to one of our openings, despite all the times I've invited you." "Because I have a real career and real responsibilities," she shot back. "I don't have time to waste on amateur hour." "Miss Phillips is one of the most respected gallerists in the city," I said, my voice steady, despite the hurt and anger churning inside me, "and she thinks I have potential." Something in Denise's expression shifted at that moment, a flicker of genuine rage that I rarely saw directed at anyone but me. It was the same look she'd had as a teenager, when I'd received praise from a teacher she'd been trying to impress, or when a boy she liked had commented on my smile. "Potential?" she hissed, stepping closer. "You wouldn't know potential if it slapped you in the face. You've been riding on sentimentality and pity your entire life. The poor little artistic sister who just needs one more chance, one more handout, one more excuse for mediocrity." I felt heat rising to my face, but I stood my ground. "I've never asked for handouts. I've worked for everything I have." "Worked?" Denise laughed, a harsh sound that echoed in the quiet store. "You've played at working. You've dabbled and dreamed while the rest of us actually built something real." "I'm building something real," I insisted. "Just because it doesn't look like your life doesn't mean it's not valuable." "Valuable? Like this trinket?" She dangled the pendant contemptuously. "This is what you consider an achievement? This is what makes you feel special?" Before I could respond, Marcus stepped forward. "Excuse me," he said firmly, "but I need to ask you to lower your voice. We have other customers who are trying to shop." Denise turned on him with the full force of her practiced intimidation, the same look she used in courtrooms to cow witnesses. "I'm having a private conversation with my sister," she said icily. "I suggest you focus on customers who can actually afford to shop here regularly." Marcus remained professional but unyielding. "All of our customers deserve respect in our store, regardless of their purchasing frequency. Now, may I help you find the tennis bracelets you were interested in?" The implicit support from Marcus, the stranger who had treated me with more dignity in 30 minutes than my sister had in years, seemed to push Denise over an edge I hadn't realized she was teetering on. "You have no idea who I am," she said to Marcus, her voice dangerously quiet, "or what I could do to your career with a single phone call." "Denise, stop," I said, reaching for her arm. "You're making a scene over nothing." She whirled toward me, her face flushed with anger. "Nothing? You think this is about nothing? This is about you, always you, thinking you deserve special treatment when you've never earned anything in your life." "What are you talking about?" I asked, genuinely confused by the intensity of her reaction. "I'm just buying a necklace." "You're being treated like you matter," she shouted, shocking everyone in the store into complete silence. "Like you belong here, like you're important." And then, before I could process what was happening, Denise's hand flew up and connected with my cheek in a slap so hard it snapped my head to the side. The sound cracked through the hushed store like a gunshot. For a moment, no one moved. My cheek burned with pain and humiliation as I raised my hand to the spot where her palm had connected. I could feel the heat of the mark she'd left, could see the shocked expressions on the faces of everyone around us. Patrick stood frozen, his eyes wide with disbelief. Marcus had stepped back instinctively but looked ready to intervene. Denise herself seemed stunned by what she had done, her hand still suspended in the air, her eyes fixed on my face as a red mark bloomed across my cheek. In all our years of conflict, she had never before resorted to physical violence. The silence stretched, broken only by the soft classical music still playing ironically in the background. I stood rooted to the spot, too shocked to speak, too humiliated to cry, simply staring at my sister as the reality of what had just happened settled over us both. In the frozen tableau of that moment, I became aware of movement at the edge of my vision. A tall man with salt and pepper hair, impeccably dressed in a charcoal suit that even I could tell cost more than my monthly rent, approached our small group. I hadn't noticed him in the store before, but the way the staff straightened as he moved suggested he was someone important. He walked with the quiet confidence of someone accustomed to command, his expression calm but purposeful. Without speaking, he positioned himself beside me, close enough that I could smell the subtle notes of his expensive cologne. He placed a gentle hand on my shoulder, the touch light but somehow anchoring me in the chaos of the moment. "Touch my wife again," he said to Denise, his voice low but carrying clearly in the silent store, "and see what happens." The words took a moment to register, first with me and then with everyone else in the vicinity. Wife? I had never seen this man before in my life, yet here he was, claiming me as his spouse with such conviction that for a second even I questioned my own memory. Denise's face, already flushed with anger, drained of color so rapidly I thought she might faint. Her hand, still suspended in the air, dropped limply to her side as her eyes darted between me and the stranger. Patrick, who had remained a passive observer throughout the confrontation, suddenly became alert, his posture shifting from bored disinterest to tense attention. "Your wife?" Denise stammered, her voice barely audible. The man's hand remained steady on my shoulder, a warm, reassuring weight. "Yes," he said simply, as though stating an obvious fact. "My wife." He turned to me then, his expression softening into such genuine concern that I almost believed his charade myself. "Are you all right, darling?" he asked, gently touching the edge of my reddened cheek with his fingertips. That looked painful. I couldn't speak, couldn't even nod, too stunned by this unexpected turn of events to formulate a response. The man seemed to take my silence as distress, and his expression hardened again as he turned back to Denise. "I believe you owe my wife an apology," he said, his tone making it clear this wasn't a request. Patrick stepped forward then, recognition dawning on his face. "Mr. Grant," he said, extending his hand. "Alexander Grant. I don't know if you remember me. We met at the Thompson Foundation Gala last year." Patrick Weber. From Berger Wealth Management. The man, Alexander Grant, ignored Patrick's outstretched hand, his attention still focused on Denise. "An apology," he repeated. "Now." Patrick's hand dropped awkwardly back to his side. "Denise," he urged in a stage whisper. "Do you have any idea who this is?" Denise seemed incapable of speech, her eyes wide with shock and growing fear. She shook her head minutely. "Alexander Grant," Patrick hissed, "founder of Grant Tech, Forbes list, worth billions." Each word seemed to land like a physical blow on my sister. Her posture, normally so confident and commanding, crumpled slightly as she realized the magnitude of her error. She had publicly assaulted the wife of one of the wealthiest and most influential men in the country, a man who, by the look of recognition on the faces of the store staff, was also a valued client of this establishment. I didn't know," she finally managed to say, addressing Alexander rather than me. "I had no idea she was. That you were. That she deserves basic human respect?" Alexander finished for her, his voice quiet but cutting. "That much should have been obvious, regardless of who she's married to." Denise flinched as though he had struck her. Around us, other customers were watching with undisguised fascination, some even taking out their phones to capture the drama unfolding before them. The store manager had appeared from somewhere, hovering anxiously nearby, clearly torn between intervening and staying out of the way of an important client. Alexander turned to Marcus, who still stood behind the counter. "My wife was making a purchase, I believe?" Marcus, recovering his professional demeanor, nodded quickly. "Yes, sir. A pendant from our spring collection." "Show it to me, please," Alexander requested. Denise, still holding the small box with my pendant, thrust it forward as though it had suddenly become too hot to hold. Alexander took it from her, opened it, and examined the piece with genuine appreciation. "Beautiful," he said, "but I think it needs something to accompany it." He turned to Marcus. "The emerald and diamond bracelet from the window display would complement this nicely, don't you think?" Marcus's eyes widened slightly, but he nodded. "An excellent pairing, sir. I'll retrieve it right away." As Marcus hurried to the window display, Alexander returned his attention to me, still playing his role with flawless conviction. "A small anniversary gift," he explained, loud enough for everyone to hear. "Though I know you prefer simplicity." I remained speechless, caught in a surreal situation that seemed to be spiraling further out of control by the second. The bracelet Marcus brought back was exquisite, and obviously astronomically expensive, with a row of small emeralds interspersed with diamonds set in what appeared to be platinum. "That's not necessary," I finally managed to whisper, finding my voice. Alexander smiled, a genuine warmth in his eyes that belied the tension of the moment. "Indulge me," he said softly, before turning back to Marcus. "We'll take both pieces." The transaction was completed swiftly, Alexander handing over a black card without so much as glancing at the total. Throughout the process, Denise and Patrick remained frozen in place, watching with expressions that ranged from shock to calculation. I could almost see the wheels turning in Patrick's head, reassessing me now that I appeared to have a connection to wealth and power. As Marcus placed the purchases in a larger bag and handed it to Alexander with deferential care, Alexander finally turned his full attention back to Denise. "I believe you were about to apologize to my wife," he prompted, his tone making it clear the matter wasn't forgotten. Denise swallowed hard, her composure in tatters. "Wilma, I'm sorry for my behavior," she said. The words clearly painful for her to utter. It was inappropriate. "Inappropriate hardly covers assault," Alexander observed coolly. "But I suppose it's a start." He placed his hand at the small of my back, guiding me gently toward the door. "Come, darling. We have lunch reservations, and I believe we've had quite enough excitement for one morning." As we moved toward the exit, he paused briefly beside Denise. "I suggest you work on your anger management issues," he said quietly. before they cost you more than just your dignity. The store staff hurried to open the door for us, and then we were outside in the bright sunlight, leaving Denise and Patrick behind in a store full of witnesses to her humiliation. Alexander's hand remained steady at my back as he guided me down the sidewalk, away from Hartman's and the scene of my public shame and unexpected rescue. I didn't speak until we had turned the corner, and Hartman's was no longer in sight. Then, finally finding my voice, I stopped walking and turned to face the stranger who had just upended my world. "Who are you?" I asked. "And why did you do that?" Alexander Grant gestured toward a small cafe across the street. "Perhaps we could sit down for a moment?" he suggested. "I owe you an explanation, and I imagine you could use a few minutes to collect yourself." Still feeling dazed, I nodded and followed him to the cafe. It was a cozy, upscale place with small tables and comfortable chairs. The hostess recognized Alexander immediately, greeting him by name and ushering us to a quiet corner table away from the windows. Within moments, a server had brought water and taken Alexander's order for 2 coffees without either of us having to ask. Once we were settled, Alexander placed the Hartman's bag on the table between us. "First," he said, "this belongs to you." "Both pieces." I shook my head. "I can't accept that bracelet. It must have cost thousands of dollars." $28,000, actually, he said matter-of-factly. "And yes, you can accept it. Consider it compensation for being an unwitting participant in my impromptu theater." My eyes widened at the figure. $28,000? Are you insane? I don't even know you. Alexander smiled, a genuine expression that softened his distinguished features. "Let me remedy that. Alexander Grant, as you may have gathered, and I must apologize profusely for my presumption back there. I overheard your sister's comments, saw the slap, and reacted." "By pretending I'm your wife?" I asked incredulously. He had the grace to look slightly abashed. It was the first thing that came to mind that would immediately change the power dynamic. "I couldn't stand by and watch you be abused like that, especially by someone who should have your best interests at heart." Our coffees arrived, giving me a moment to process his words. I wrapped my hands around the warm mug, grateful for something to hold on to in this surreal situation. "For what it's worth," Alexander continued when the server had departed, "I'm not actually married, never have been, so there's no real Mrs. Grant to be offended by our little charade." "That's good to know, I guess," I said, still trying to make sense of everything. "But why involve yourself at all?" "It was just a family disagreement." Alexander's expression turned serious. "That was not a disagreement, Wilma. That was abuse, plain and simple. Your sister struck you in public after verbally demeaning and humiliating you. No one deserves that treatment, especially not from family." I felt my cheeks flush, both from embarrassment at having a stranger witness such a personal moment, and from the strange validation of having someone name Denise's behavior for what it was. For so long, I had accepted her treatment as normal, as something I deserved for not being as successful or impressive as she was. "I should probably explain a bit more about myself," Alexander said, taking a sip of his coffee. "I founded Grant Tech about 15 years ago. We develop security software, primarily for financial institutions and government agencies. The company has been quite successful. Successful enough for you to throw around $28,000 on a bracelet for a stranger," I observed. He smiled again. "Money is a tool, Wilma. Sometimes it's useful for solving problems. Sometimes it's useful for sending messages. And what message were you sending to my sister?" "That her behavior has consequences," he said simply. "That she can't treat people that way and expect to get away with it just because she perceives them as having less power or status than herself." I took a long sip of my coffee, considering his words. "You don't know anything about me or my family situation." "True," he acknowledged. "But I know bullying when I see it. I know what it looks like when someone derives their sense of self-worth from diminishing others." He paused, studying me over the rim of his coffee cup. "I used to be on the receiving end of that kind of treatment. Before Grant Tech, before the success. I was the scholarship kid at an elite university, surrounded by people who had never had to worry about money or opportunities. So this was, what, vicarious revenge for your past? I asked, an edge creeping into my voice. Alexander shook his head. Not revenge, a correction. Your sister needs to learn that she can't treat people that way, regardless of their position or relationship to her. And you, if you don't mind me saying so, need to learn that you deserve better treatment. His bluntness caught me off guard. Part of me wanted to defend Denise, to explain away her behavior as I had done so many times before. Another part, a part that had been silenced for too long, recognized the truth in his words. I'm still processing the fact that my sister slapped me in public, I admitted. I've never seen her lose control like that before. People rarely show their true colors in public, Alexander observed. The fact that she did suggests this isn't an isolated incident in private. I didn't confirm or deny his assessment, but the truth must have shown on my face because he nodded slightly, as though I had spoken aloud. Tell me about your work, he said, changing the subject. I heard you mention an art gallery? The unexpected question, and his apparent genuine interest, threw me momentarily. I'm an assistant curator at Phillips Contemporary, I said. We specialize in emerging artists and mid-career retrospectives. Contemporary art has always fascinated me, Alexander said. Though I'll admit my knowledge is limited. I appreciate the creativity and vision, but sometimes feel I'm missing context for fully understanding the work. As we continued talking, I found myself sharing details about recent exhibitions, artists I was excited about, and the philosophy behind curation. Alexander listened with genuine interest, asking insightful questions that revealed a sharp mind and genuine curiosity. By the time we had finished our coffees, the conversation had shifted so naturally that the incident at the jewelry store seemed almost like a distant memory. I have a proposition for you, Alexander said as our cups were cleared away. Grant Tech has been acquiring art for our new headquarters, but frankly, I'm not satisfied with the collection. It feels corporate, soulless. I'd be interested in hiring you as a consultant to help us build something more meaningful. I stared at him, suspicious again. Is this a pity offer? Because I don't need charity, Mr. Grant. Alexander, please, he corrected. And no, it's not charity or pity. It's a legitimate business proposition. I need someone with expertise and vision who isn't afraid to push back against convention. From our conversation, you seem to have both qualities in abundance. I hesitated, torn between gratitude for his help and suspicion about his motives. Why would you trust a stranger with something like that? I'm a good judge of character, he said simply. It's how I've built my company. By recognizing talent and integrity when I see it. He reached into his jacket and produced a business card, placing it on the table between us. Think about it. No pressure, no obligation. If you're interested, call the direct number on the back. If not, no hard feelings. I picked up the card, running my finger over the embossed logo. I don't know what to say. You don't have to say anything right now, Alexander assured me. Just know that the offer is genuine, as is my regret for putting you in an awkward position back there. I reacted instinctively, but I should have found a less theatrical way to intervene. As we prepared to leave, Alexander insisted on paying for the coffees despite my protest. Outside the cafe, he hailed a taxi for me, handling the elegant Hartman's bag with care as he helped me inside. The pendant truly is beautiful, he said, placing the bag beside me. It suits you perfectly. Thank you, I said, finding the words inadequate for everything that had transpired. For the pendant, for stepping in, for seeing me, I guess. He smiled, a gentle expression that reached his eyes. Sometimes we all need someone to see us clearly, Wilma. I hope you'll consider my offer. I hope you'll consider my offer. As the taxi pulled away, I watched Alexander Grant standing on the sidewalk, a curious figure who had entered my life like a whirlwind and left it utterly changed. My phone buzzed in my pocket, the first of what would undoubtedly be many angry messages from Denise. But for once, I didn't feel the immediate compulsion to check it, to soothe her feelings, to apologize for existing in a way that somehow threatened her. Instead, I leaned back in the seat, fingering the elegant shopping bag and wondering what exactly had just happened to my carefully constructed, if somewhat diminished, existence. Sunday dinner at my parents' home had been a tradition since Denise and I were children. Even after we both moved out, we were expected to appear promptly at 5 o'clock each week, bearing wine or dessert as our contribution to the meal. In the years since Denise had married Patrick, she had occasionally begged off with excuses about work commitments or social obligations, but I had rarely missed a dinner, clinging to the hope that someday these gatherings might feel like the warm family occasions I craved. The day after the incident at Hartman's, I arrived at my parents' modest colonial home with a knot of dread in my stomach. I had spent the evening before alternating between ignoring Denise's increasingly hostile text messages and staring at Alexander Grant's business card, turning it over in my hands as though it might reveal some hidden truth about the strange encounter. I had worn the emerald pendant, though I'd left the bracelet locked in my apartment safe, still unable to fully process the extravagance of the gift or what accepting it might mean. The pendant felt like a talisman against the confrontation I knew was coming. A physical reminder that at least one person had seen value in standing up for me. My mother answered the door, her expression immediately telling me that Denise had already arrived and shared her version of events. "There you are," she said, ushering me inside without the usual kiss on the cheek. "We need to talk about what happened yesterday." In the living room, Denise sat primly on the sofa beside Patrick, both of them dressed as though for brunch at a country club rather than a family dinner. My father occupied his usual armchair, his face bearing the weary expression he always wore when navigating conflict between his daughters. "Wilma," he acknowledged with a nod, "your sister has been telling us about an upsetting incident." I remained standing, suddenly unwilling to take my usual place in the family hierarchy, perched on the edge of a hard dining chair, while everyone else claimed the comfortable seats. "I imagine she has," I said, my voice calmer than I felt, though I wonder if her version includes the part where she slapped me across the face in front of a store full of witnesses. Denise's eyes narrowed. "I reacted badly, I admit, but you deliberately humiliated me, Wilma. You let that man believe we were strangers. Let him think I was some random abusive person, when you could have explained we were sisters having a disagreement." "A disagreement?" I repeated incredulously. "You verbally attacked me, insulted my career, and then physically assaulted me. That's not a disagreement, Denise. That's abuse." My mother made a dismissive sound. "Don't be so dramatic, Wilma," sisters argue. "It's not abuse." "She slapped me, Mom," I said, turning to face her directly. "Hard enough to leave a mark. In public. After telling me that my entire career is worthless and I don't deserve basic respect." "You were being helped by the store clerk before me," Denise interjected, her voice rising. "Me, their actual regular customer. And then you didn't even have the decency to introduce me properly when I arrived. Because you immediately started belittling me, I shot back. You couldn't stand that someone was treating me like I mattered. And then you pulled that stunt with Alexander Grant." Denise continued as though I hadn't spoken. "Do you have any idea how humiliating that was? Patrick's firm has been trying to get Grant as a client for years, and now that's completely ruined because of your lies." I shook my head, amazed at her ability to turn the situation around. "I didn't lie about anything. I didn't even speak. Mr. Grant made his own assumptions based on what he witnessed." "You let him believe you were his wife," Denise nearly shouted. "I was in shock because my sister had just slapped me," I replied evenly. "And before I could process what was happening, he was helping me. Which is more than any of you have ever done when Denise treats me this way." My father shifted uncomfortably in his chair. "Wilma, whatever happened, I'm sure your sister is sorry for losing her temper. But you need to understand how serious this is. Patrick says this Grant fellow is worth billions. His business could have meant a lot to their firm. Of course. That was what mattered to them. The potential impact on Denise's husband's career, not the fact that their daughter had been publicly assaulted by their other daughter. "I'm curious," I said, a strange calm settling over me as years of suppressed feelings rose to the surface. "Has it ever occurred to any of you to ask why Denise feels so threatened by me? Why the sight of me being treated with basic human dignity sends her into a rage. My mother's expression hardened. Now you're being ridiculous. Your sister has only ever tried to help you. She's offered you connections, advice, even financial help when you were struggling with that art history degree that's barely paying your rent. She's offered me condescension packaged as help, I corrected. She's offered to introduce me to people as her charity case of a sister. She's offered loans with strings attached that would have given her control over my life choices. That's not help, Mom. That's control. Denise stood up, her face flushed. This is exactly why I lost my temper. You twist everything. You've always played the victim, always made me look like the bad guy when all I've tried to do is push you to be better. Better by whose standards? I asked quietly. Yours? Mom and Dad's? What if I'm already good enough by my own standards? A heavy silence fell over the room. Patrick looked uncomfortable, clearly wishing he were anywhere else. My father stared at the floor, while my mother's expression wavered between anger and confusion. I've spent my entire life trying to earn your approval, I continued, addressing my family collectively. Trying to make you see that my path might be different from yours, but it's still valid. Still worthwhile, still mine. We just want what's best for you, my mother said, her voice softening slightly. No, I said gently. You want what you think is best for me. You want what would make you proud to tell your friends about. What would fit your definition of success? I turned to Denise, meeting her gaze directly. And you want me to stay small so you can feel big. You need me to fail, so your successes seem more impressive. Every time I find a little happiness or success on my own terms, you find a way to diminish it. Because if I can be happy without following your rules, what does that say about the choices you've made? Denise's mouth opened and closed, but for once, no cutting retort emerged. I'm done, I said simply. Done trying to earn love that should be unconditional. Done apologizing for not being who you want me to be. Done accepting treatment that I would never inflict on anyone else. My mother stepped forward, alarm replacing her previous irritation. What are you saying, Wilma? That you're cutting off your family over one argument? This isn't about one argument, I replied. This is about a lifetime of arguments, all variations on the same theme. I'm not enough as I am. And I've finally realized that the problem isn't me. It's that nothing I do will ever be enough for you, because you've decided in advance that my choices aren't valid. I reached into my pocket and pulled out Alexander Grant's business card. I had been considering his offer since our meeting, weighing my options, questioning his motives. But in that moment, standing in my parents' living room, under the weight of their judgment and disappointment, the decision suddenly became clear. I've been offered a consulting position with Grant Tech, I said, noting with a detached sort of satisfaction how Denise's eyes widened and Patrick sat up straighter. I'm going to take it. A consulting position? My father repeated skeptically. Doing what? Curating their corporate collection, I explained. Using my expertise. The expertise none of you have ever valued. To help build something meaningful. Alexander Grant offered you a job? Denise asked, disbelief evident in her voice. Just like that? After meeting you once? I met her gaze steadily. Yes, because unlike my own family, he recognized my knowledge and talent within minutes of speaking with me. The statement hung in the air, simple but devastating in its truth. I'll see myself out, I said, turning toward the door. I won't be at dinner next Sunday, or the Sunday after that. When I'm ready to see you again, if I'm ready, I'll let you know. I left without waiting for their responses. The weight of years of disapproval and inadequacy lifting with each step away from the house. In the car, I pulled out my phone and dialed the number on the back of Alexander's card. Alexander Grant, he answered on the second ring. It's Wilma, I said. About that consulting position. I'd like to discuss the details, if the offer is still open. It absolutely is, he replied, and I could hear the smile in his voice. When would you like to start? 2 weeks later, I stood in the lobby of the Grant Tech headquarters, a sleek glass and steel building in the financial district. After several meetings with Alexander and his team, we had finalized the terms of my contract. a generous consulting fee that would allow me to maintain my position at Phillips Contemporary while advising Grant Tech on their collection. Augusta had been surprisingly supportive of the arrangement, seeing it as an opportunity to build connections with potential clients and donors for the gallery. "Just don't forget where your primary loyalties lie," she had cautioned with a smile. "And don't let all that corporate money dull your eye for the genuinely innovative." I had promised her it wouldn't, and I meant it. This opportunity was a chance to grow, not to abandon the values and aesthetic that had guided my career thus far. As I waited for the security guard to process my new consultant badge, I heard the distinctive click of high heels on marble and turned to find Denise striding toward the reception desk, determination written across her features. She hadn't seen me yet. Her attention focused on the receptionist she was approaching, with the confident air of someone accustomed to getting what she wanted. "I need to see Wilma Johnson," she was saying as I stepped into her line of sight. "She's a consultant here. It's urgent family business." The receptionist looked uncertain, glancing between Denise and me as I moved closer. "Hello, Denise," I said calmly. "What are you doing here?" She turned, momentarily startled by my presence, then quickly composed herself. "We need to talk," she said, privately. I considered her for a moment, noting the designer suit, the perfect makeup, the careful arrangement of her hair, all armor against a world she saw as constantly judging her worth. For the first time, I felt something close to compassion for my sister and the prison of expectations she had built around herself. "I'm about to go into a meeting," I said, not unkindly. "But I can spare a few minutes. There's a coffee shop downstairs." As we turned toward the elevators, I caught sight of Alexander emerging from one, deep in conversation with a colleague. He looked up, spotted me, and then noticed Denise beside me. His expression shifted immediately to concern, and he changed direction to intercept us. "Wilma," he greeted me warmly, before turning a considerably cooler gaze on my sister. "Miss Weber, this is unexpected." Denise's posture stiffened, but she managed a tight smile. "Mr. Grant, I was hoping to have a word with my sister." "Of course," Alexander said, his tone neutral but watchful. "Wilma, we're meeting in the 4th floor conference room in 20 minutes. Take whatever time you need." The unspoken message was clear. I was valued here, and he would back me up if needed. With a reassuring nod in my direction, Alexander continued on his way, leaving me alone with Denise and the weight of our unfinished business. The coffee shop in the Grant Tech building's lobby was a stark contrast to the family dinner table where we'd last confronted each other, neutral territory with the soft hum of conversation and the comforting aroma of fresh coffee creating a buffer between us. Denise sat across from me, her hands wrapped around her untouched latte, her usual confidence notably diminished. "So," I said after a long silence, "what was so urgent you needed to track me down at work?" Denise's gaze remained fixed on her cup. "Patrick's firm lost the Thompson account because of what happened at Hartman's. Someone recorded part of the incident on their phone. It made its way to Thompson's board." I felt a twinge of sympathy despite myself. "I'm sorry about that," I said genuinely. "But I didn't ask anyone to record anything." "I know," Denise admitted, finally looking up. "That's not why I'm here." She took a deep breath, as though steeling herself for something difficult. "Mom and Dad are furious that you've missed 2 Sunday dinners. They wanted me to convince you to come back, to smooth things over." "And is that what you want?" I asked. "To smooth things over?" Denise's perfectly manicured fingers tightened around her cup. I need to understand what happened. How you went from my little sister who couldn't get a decent job to consulting for Alexander Grant in the span of 2 weeks. There it was, the real reason for her visit. Not reconciliation, but an attempt to make sense of a shift in the power dynamic she had always controlled. "I didn't seek Alexander out," I explained. "He witnessed your behavior in the store and stepped in. After, we talked about art. He recognized that I know what I'm talking about, and he offered me a job. It's that simple." "Nothing with Alexander Grant is simple," Denise countered. "He doesn't just hand out jobs to random people." "I'm not random people, Denise." I'm a trained curator with years of experience and specialized knowledge. The fact that you can't see value in that doesn't mean others can't. She flinched slightly at my words. I never said your work had no value. You've implied it with every dismissive comment, every eye roll, every change of subject when I talk about my career, I said. You've made it clear that unless I'm making six figures and wearing designer labels, I'm failing at life by your standards. A long silence stretched between us, broken only by the ambient noise of the coffee shop. When Denise spoke again, her voice was quieter than I'd ever heard it. Did you ever think that maybe I'm jealous of you? The question caught me completely off guard. Jealous? Of me? That's absurd. Is it? She set down her cup and met my eyes directly. You've always known exactly who you are and what you want. You never doubted your path, even when everyone told you it was impractical. You found work you genuinely love, while She trailed off, looking away. I became a lawyer because that's what successful people do. I married Patrick because he checked all the right boxes. I buy the right brands, and join the right clubs, and say all the right things at dinner parties, and none of it makes me happy. I stared at my sister, seeing her clearly perhaps for the first time in our adult lives. The perfect exterior she presented to the world suddenly seemed less like armor and more like a cage she had built around herself. Why have you never said any of this before? I asked. Denise gave a brittle laugh. Because admitting it would mean acknowledging I might have made the wrong choices. That maybe the little sister I've been looking down on all these years actually got it right. The revelation hung between us, reshaping the landscape of our relationship in ways I couldn't yet fully comprehend. I thought about the slap in the jewelry store, not an isolated incident of lost temper, but the culmination of years of resentment and regret projected onto the easiest target. What do you want from me now, Denise? I asked finally. An absolution? Permission to change your life if you're so unhappy? I don't know, she admitted. I just know that seeing you here, in this building, working with someone like Grant, it forced me to confront some uncomfortable truths. I considered my sister, really considered her, perhaps for the first time. Beyond the designer clothes and perfect makeup was a woman who had followed all the rules society had laid out for her, only to find that the promised rewards of happiness and fulfillment hadn't materialized. I can't fix your life, I said gently. And I'm not ready to pretend the past never happened. You hurt me, Denise. Not just at the store, but for years. That doesn't just go away with one coffee and a confession. She nodded, accepting this truth with unexpected grace. I know, I don't want to lose my sister completely, despite everything. Before I could respond, I noticed Alexander approaching our table, his expression questioning. I checked my watch and realized our 20 minutes were up. I have to go to my meeting, I said, standing. But this conversation isn't finished. Denise rose as well, gathering her composure around her like a familiar cloak. Will you at least consider coming to dinner this Sunday, for Mom and Dad's sake? I shook my head. Not yet. I need more time, but maybe we could have lunch next week. Just the two of us. A flicker of hope crossed her face. I'd like that. Alexander reached us then, greeting us both politely before addressing me. Ready to head upstairs? The team is waiting. As we walked toward the elevators, leaving Denise behind in the lobby, Alexander kept his voice low. Everything all right? Getting there, I replied truthfully. Slowly. The months that followed brought changes I could never have imagined when I'd first walked into Hartman's fine jewelry store. My work with Grant Tech expanded beyond the initial consulting role into a position as their official curator, working in partnership with Phillips Contemporary to build a collection that showcased emerging artists alongside established names. The emerald and diamond bracelet remained in my safe, a reminder of a pivotal moment rather than a piece I felt comfortable wearing. The pendant, however, became a daily talisman, a symbol of my growing confidence and self-worth. I began therapy, working through the complex emotions and patterns that had defined my family relationships for so long. The process wasn't easy, but it was necessary, allowing me to set boundaries while still leaving room for healing and growth. My relationship with my parents evolved slowly. At first, they were hurt and confused by my distance, unable to understand why I couldn't simply return to the dynamics that had always defined our family. But as weeks turned into months, they began to see me differently. Not as the disappointing daughter who needed to be fixed, but as an accomplished woman who had forged her own path despite their lack of support. Denise and I established a cautious new connection, meeting for occasional lunches where we worked through years of misunderstandings and resentments. She eventually left her position at the law firm to start a small practice focusing on arts advocacy and nonprofit law, a change that brought her both financial uncertainty and a genuine sense of purpose she had never experienced before. As for Alexander, he became both a valued colleague and a true friend. His intervention in the jewelry store could have been a one-time act of kindness from a stranger, but instead it became the foundation for a relationship based on mutual respect and shared values. Under his mentorship, I gained confidence in my professional judgment and learned to navigate the corporate world without compromising my artistic integrity. 1 year after the slap that had changed everything, I found myself standing in the newly opened Grant Tech Gallery, a public space showcasing the corporate collection I had helped build, with free admission and educational programs for local schools. Alexander stood beside me at the opening reception, watching with quiet pride as critics and collectors admired the thoughtfully curated works. "Did you ever imagine this is where that day would lead?" he asked, nodding toward a group of art students eagerly discussing a bold installation piece. I touched the emerald pendant at my neck, thinking of all the paths that had brought me to this moment. Never. But I'm grateful for it. Strange as that sounds. Not strange at all, Alexander said. Sometimes the most painful moments become the most transformative, if we're brave enough to learn from them. My phone buzzed with a text message. Denise, sending congratulations on the gallery opening and a photo of her new office, modest but filled with artwork I had helped her select. Progress, not perfection. As I looked around the crowded gallery, I realized that the greatest lesson of the past year hadn't been about art or career success, but about something far more fundamental: the courage to define my own worth, regardless of others' perceptions. Sometimes the people who should love you the most see you the least, I said, voicing the realization aloud. But when you finally see yourself clearly, the right people will see you too. The slap that was meant to keep me in my place became the wake-up call that helped me find where I truly belonged. Alexander nodded, understanding without needing further explanation. Around us, the gallery hummed with conversation and possibility, a physical manifestation of what can happen when we refuse to be diminished by others' limitations and instead embrace our own value. Have you ever had a moment that completely changed how you see yourself or your relationships? A turning point that forced you to stand up for your worth? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below. And if this journey resonated with you, please hit that like button. Subscribe to hear more stories like this. And share with someone who might need a reminder that they deserve respect, regardless of what others think. Thank you for listening to my story. And remember, sometimes the most painful moments lead to the most beautiful transformations.